Hello and welcome everyone to the One People Show for this week. I hope you've had an amazing week because it has been somewhat action-packed out there. And if you may recall, at the beginning of the year when the One People's Public Trust information started to really get some momentum and start spreading the word, one of the most common comments was, why aren't we seeing anything? Why aren't we seeing the repercussions yet? And the answer was always because the system is running on fumes. Its supply has been cut off, and now it's just running on what's in the tank. And it certainly appears that over the last week, the fuel light went on, and it's about to run out. And we're seeing more and more daily information coming out. If you've been keeping track of all this, you'll see that HSBC cannot stay out of the news. And we'll talk a little bit about that later, but we've got a variety of things to talk about today. Bob's follow-up with his bank will be one of them. A small update on Kiri. She is home, but we'll get to that as well. Firstly, let's bring out the crew. We've got Brian Kelly.
Hello, Lisa. Bob, Chris,
hello.
Chat room, everyone listening. Hello. Another day in paradise. And boy, oh boy, things heating up. I can feel the excitement. I can feel the anticipation. It's boiling. I think everybody can feel it, and energetically, it just feels like a absolute tidal wave. And everybody we've been talking for weeks now about how August is really gearing up to be an extremely interesting month, and I think the events over the course of the last week or so have proven that it's starting with a bang, and it's only the 5th. So, boy, oh boy, yeah, let's get down to it. I know we got a lot to talk about. Happy to be here.
Good. And welcome, Bob.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Lisa, everyone in chat room. Welcome tonight, and yes, it's some incredible things. It's every day history's being made, every single day. It's crazy. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, me too. Wouldn't want to be anywhere else. And joining us for the last time this week on the 5D Media Network, but with some big news, which we'll also get to, is Chris Hales.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here with the guys, Brian, Bob, Lisa, everybody out there in the rooms, etc. Yes, big announcement, which we'll deal with, as Lisa says, a bit later on. But I'd just like to absolutely say that I can't believe where we are from August 2013 to August 2012. Think about that 12 months for a minute, and you'll just go, wow, because change is happening so fast now. You lose perspective on where we've come from, and it's still going, and it will continue to change.
Yes, lots of expansion happening. So, Bob, do you want to kick things off? People have been very interested in hearing about your story with your bank, and after you've done that, maybe we can, or maybe before. It depends what you think the order of events should be. Should we talk about the knocking 3 times business?
When are you going to talk about your Gold Coast experience? Are you going to do that at some point before the end of the call here, or are you going to save that for tomorrow?
No, I will talk about that, but later.
Yeah,
I
think you should.
We'll talk about the 3 knocks after.
Okay.
But I did get a phone call today with the head vice president. There's so many of them, of the bank. And he called me, and I do have a recording of the conversation, which I'm going to play. I did post it briefly, but I removed the post because there's phone numbers and things that I have to take out before I can put that out there. But I will let you listen to the conversation, and I'll mute out the parts that you're not supposed to hear. But you'll get the gist of the conversation. If you just give me 1 minute to set this up.
Okay.
And
you are obligated to accept deposit. in the negotiable instrument that we are obligated to accept deposits. You are 100% correct.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking for the negotiable instrument that you're planning to deposit.
The negotiable instrument is the certificate of value, which qualifies as a documentary draft.
And where is the collecting bank that's involved with this?
I am the bank, and the financing statement is there, which shows where the origin are.
Okay, so when we go out, as you're aware, with any type of deposit that is made, the bank acts as a collecting agent. So
Okay.
we, in turn, collect that money on behalf of the customer, which is you.
I have created the money in the form of a representation of value, which you call a negotiable instrument, which is the same process that you take forth when I go in there for a loan. When I go in there for a loan, you deposit the promissory note as cash, as per the guidelines for the Federal Reserve. Now, that cash that you put into the account, can you show me the proof, title, origin, and ownership of those funds?
Any type of loan proceeds that go into your account, the collateral or the value behind the cash deposited into your account is the property in which you're getting the loan. Whether it be a house, whether it be vacant land,
I understand.
whether it be a motorcycle.
I understand. This isn't for debate, Tom. There's been a 5-year investigation on the whole lending procedure, a paradigm report, which I have also included with you. I'm not going to play games with you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? All loans are fraudulent because it is the people who are the creditors in every lending transaction. That's a proven fact. Now, it's a fact that's been hidden from the majority of the public. I am not one of those majority. I am aware of how the banking system works. I understand that I am always the creditor and that all money is backed on my value. That value has been secured in a financing statement. Now, you, as a member of the Federal Reserve Board, have been issuing Federal Reserve notes, which are banknotes, IOUs, promising to pay the people. You cannot promise to pay the people if you have not taken something first. That value is ours. Now, I have given you all the proper documentation. If you do not have a lawful reason for dishonoring my instrument, I expect that deposit to be in there. Now, you had 72 hours by law to process that transaction, which you were well over.
Go on. Are you there, Robert?
Yes, I am.
I'm listening.
So my question to you is, are you going to break the law right now and dishonor my instrument, or are you going to process the transaction?
We made a statement that we are not going to process your instrument.
Okay, can you give me a lawful, and I need to know the reason for which you're dishonoring my instrument.
Your instrument is non-negotiable. You are depositing a non-negotiable instrument. For us to accept your deposit, we would need to go and collect that money or monies from somewhere. You're saying that it's backed by the full faith and credit of Robert Allen Wright. If I understand it correctly, and maybe I don't.
Well, you've got a financing statement there, right? And you being part of the Federal Reserve System, are the debtor. Okay? The Bank of International Settlements and the Federal Reserve has been foreclosed on, unrebutted. That value was secured. All the value basically the people own the bank. We have always been the value. The game is over. The whole Federal Reserve, it's crumbling. It's done. It's over. People are aware of how money works. You create money out of thin air and then ask people to pay it back. What consideration have you ever given anyone in any transaction?
You're saying from the standpoint that we just give money away.
Well, you give money that you don't have.
As in First National Community Bank.
Every bank.
I can't speak of other banks.
Okay, well, explain to me like a 3-year-old how the fractional reserve system works.
How the Federal Reserve operates their business.
Okay.
And the rules and regulations for which they are
It is our business, Tom. It is our business. Because we are the creditors. Don't cut the people out of this. Since 1933, the government's been bankrupt, and I know this. Since the gold seizure, there's been no money in circulation. The only people who have money are the people. The government and the banks have nothing. You have nothing to lend. In any lending transaction, can you, and I've asked you this several times, and I put it in writing, can you show me the proof of ownership, rights and title to any fund that you have ever lent in a lending transaction to anyone? Do you have the rights, title, and ownership 3 generations to any money that you put in anyone's account in a lending transaction?
Well, absolutely. We would have the deed or mortgage to a property.
No, okay, that is not...
We do not provide or give out that deed or mortgage to the property until the loan was satisfied.
If I took out a personal loan or an unsecured loan, and that is not the origin of the funds, the funds are not coming from the collateral.
An unsecured loan? You're correct.
Secured. Okay? So where does that money come from?
It comes from retained earnings of a bank.
No, it does not. You do not lend out your reserves. And modern money mechanics plainly shows that you exchange promissory notes for cash, for credits to the person's account.
We could certainly go back and forth on the banking industry and the pros and cons of it.
Okay, first off, Tom, right now, and I'm going to warn you again, you are working as an individual on behalf of a foreclosed entity that has been convicted of treason, running debt slavery system, and a private money system. Should you choose to uphold a debt slavery system, private money system, you are implicating yourself in treason. Now, unless you're ready to rebut those filings, okay, point for point with particularity and specificity, you are operating it by 10%, okay, which does meet your reserve requirements, giving you that consideration, okay? 10% would go to the bank that you can use as you wish. The rest of it goes into the account for me.
And you currently have an account, and you're an account owner at FNCB.
I am.
And you're using the system, the FNCB system currently.
Yes, I am.
Well, Robert, you certainly have the ability of opening up an account at another bank and having this negotiated. We are not going to do it. We would appreciate it if you would stop the phone calls.
I would appreciate if you would provide me a lawful, documented reason in writing of why my document is being dishonored. Because I'm telling you, and I have told and explained to you that by doing so, you are breaking the law. Now, unless you have a lawful reason, I'm going to ask you to do your fiduciary duty and process the transaction.
Or give proof of reason for not.
Or give proof of reason not.
Or be prosecuted.
We are not going, the proof of reason is that it is non-negotiable. You could certainly have recourse in this situation, and you're more than willing to pursue those options.
Yeah, well.
Okay, so
you will.
Are you sending me a letter with a signature explaining?
I am not sending you a letter. If anything, I am telling you right now the certificate of value that you presented affords the bank no opportunity to collect the monies on which you say it's worth. If you provide that information to me and we can collect that $3.5 million, we will further look into the matter.
Okay, $3.5 million, okay? I am giving you of real value. The value is in the document itself. I am the creator of money, as I always have been, as every person always has been. That's what allows you to create funds immediately into a person's account when they go for a lending transaction, because their signature gives them access to their trust fund, which you've been accessing all along. I understand, right, that the system works because my value was stolen by the Federal Reserve System in the birth registration and the certificate of birth that is held as collateral for all my accounting, which you've been accessing all along.
You as in First National Community Bank?
Well, probably not you at your level, but several pay grade levels above you, yes.
I'm vice president here at the bank.
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, but you also report to the Federal Reserve Board.
We do not report to the Federal Reserve Board. We are under the guidelines of the Federal Reserve System.
Okay, and that Federal Reserve System has access and has always had access. Explain to me this. If they do not have our value secured, how can they issue people bank notes, which are promises to pay?
Robert, you're going to have to take this up with the Federal Reserve Bank.
No. You just identified yourself as a vice president of the bank, and if you're incompetent enough to know how money works, then you're not a credit to your position. I asked you a very simple question.
You could certainly think that, and you're more than willing to have that.
How can they issue banknotes if they don't owe us something, if they haven't taken something first?
Going forward, Robert, are you going to continue to call First National Community Bank
File documents.
and inquire regarding this issue?
No.
Yes or no?
Well, I am going to pursue the issue in a grand jury if I have to.
And then that's one of the recourses that you have available to you. My question is this going to continue, or are you going to pursue the next level and go to the Attorney General? You don't have to tell me, the Attorney General, what your course is. I need to know if you're going to continue to call First National Community Bank regarding this issue.
Are you going to provide me legal reason for dishonoring my instrument in writing?
I am telling you, the legal issue is that it is a non-negotiable instrument.
In writing, Thomas. In writing, are you going to dishonor my instrument in writing with a legal reason why?
I am telling you right now, and the answer is no.
No, you're not. Then I will continue to pursue this because you are not operating honorably. You're not operating transparently, and you're not following the guidelines that are set forth to you. If you want to dishonor my instrument, then do it legally.
Robert, any further action with regards to this should be directed to me.
Okay, that's fine.
My number is 570-558.
Wait, hold on one moment. Let me. Yes. Okay, I got it.
All right?
Oh, Bob.
Okay.
He's trying to stop
Take your time, Robert.
It was me that he said.
You're not going to send a letter. You're just going to send my documents back untouched.
Are you saying that these are not copies? These are original documents?
Those are original documents. They've got wedding signatures on them.
Where do you want me to mail these documents, Robert?
Well, I don't want you to mail them anything. I want you to process them, and I've made that very clear to you.
Robert, where would you like them sent to? I would send them
if you're going to send them to me, they're going to have to be sent with a letter signed by you explaining the legal reason for dishonoring my document.
If not,
Very good, Robert.
Very good. Otherwise, if you choose to keep it,
You within 7 to 10 days.
huh? Well, actually, being that you have the document in your possession, that counts as acceptance of the document, okay? You have accepted the document. You had 72 hours with which to process that document. According to the rules in the UCC, you are already in dishonor.
And you have recourse to pursue with regards to that.
Okay. And I do intend to do so.
Okay? Thank you, Robert, for your time.
Thank you.
Hey, Bob, have I told you I love you today?
Ditto.
That was awesome, Bob. Actually.
Oh, my Lord.
That was really, really, you held that space so well. Mind you, he's a very, very well-trained, functionary within the bank. He wasn't going to give anything away. But I do absolutely note that when you told him all loans are fraudulent, he didn't deny it. Didn't even attempt to.
Was that when he said, moving forward?
I don't know. I don't think he said anything at all to it. I think the conversation just moved on. But he did not. If you went to a banker and said, all your loans are fraudulent, what do you think they're going to say? They're going to go bananas. That's a direct attack on their integrity at every level. And he said nothing. Didn't even bring it up. He didn't even say, well, how can you say all our loans are fraudulent? We're following. He didn't even try to defend it in any way, shape, or form.
I think at that point he knew. He really was. He was painted. He's in a corner because he was already past the 72 hours, and he knew it, and he knew that I knew it. He's already accepted the instrument, so now he's forced in a position where he either has to pay it or he has to dishonor it. And my point was, if he's going to dishonor it, he's going to do it the right way.
Yes.
So the big sticking point was that it was not negotiable, meaning they couldn't turn around and monetize it in their usual fashion.
Exactly.
They were just going to have to settle for the 10% transaction fee.
I could get the $3.5 million. All I have to do is simply make the document negotiable.
Yeah.
But if I make the document negotiable, I will not only be underwriting that document, I will be underwriting the hundreds of millions of dollars in sales and resales of that document as well. Which
is, that's the smoke and mirrors.
Exactly.
And every time he said, you notice a number of times he said, your documents don't afford the bank the opportunity to collect the money from elsewhere, being we can't sell it. That's what that statement means.
Yeah, there's
So Bob, if they made that, if you made the document a negotiable instrument, they turned around and they resold it and did their fractional reserve thing that they do, does that change it to where you would be obligated to pay it back like a loan? Or
no, I wouldn't be obligated to pay it back as a loan. But what they would do is they would bundle that into some sort of retail package that they would sell off. They would keep the document and bundle it with a bunch of mortgages or other debt that they would sell.
Still contributing to the fraud, except Bob would have a piece of the pie.
I'm just curious to see if they would actually. I mean, $3.5 million. I'm just curious to see if they would. That would still be groundbreaking. If you created your own documentation to go get $3.5 million out from a bank, you don't have to pay back. Just for experimenting purposes, I'm thinking, shoot, it might be worth a try. Just go in there and do that. Considering, it'd be funny because there's a reason why he didn't want to give you a written response, because he knows that you know that he knows. That sounds confusing, I know, but that if he puts that in writing, you're gonna tear that thing apart.
Screwed.
Yeah, there's also a second aspect to this, and don't forget these people are very nefarious and sneaky. He did not ever mention anywhere in the conversation there was any kind of technical error with your documentation. He never said this is fraud. He never said you're trying to get money by deception. None of that stuff.
Yep.
Okay. And I suspect the same applies to what Kerry did in theory, except that the police then turned around and started laying charges on Kiri. Now, if he writes back to Bob and says, we decline this instrument, we won't put it through because it's not negotiable, they're not accusing him of fraud. How could they then play games with Bob's life?
The problem with Kiri was that she used
that check.
She used a check from a closed account, and that's their document. It's not hers. And they did not authorize her to use the document in that fashion.
One of the things that we've been saying is that it has to be original, which is what yours was.
Also true. Yeah. My point is that he never once mentioned that this was what you were doing was in any way wrong. It's just that they couldn't collect on it. That was my point. That what you've done is actually what needs to be done. They're declining to process it in this fashion because they can't unjustly enrich themselves from it.
Right.
Yeah.
And they don't want to set a precedent because it's the slippery slope they don't want to be on.
But it does. One of the things that I found that I took away from the whole experience is how much the conversation between banker and customer has changed. Because I was clearly in the position of power. He didn't argue the foreclosure. He didn't argue the fact that they were committing treason. He didn't argue anything.
No.
Matter of fact, the few times he did answer the question, he agreed. You're absolutely right.
And when he completely ran out of anything, when you're actually putting the Federal Reserve's activities right in front of him, he says, well, we could go back and forth about, banking forever, blah, 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 blah. He didn't engage at all. Couldn't. Had nothing.
I mean, I legitimately, based on the tone of that guy's voice, I seriously think that there's not a whole lot more about the intricacies of how banking really operates that he didn't share there. I mean, I imagine that there's probably a little bit more that he understands as it pertains to fractional reserve lending. As a vice president of a bank that has multiple branches, I don't think you could get that job without having that information. Shoot, maybe you can. Who knows? Maybe he was the bank janitor, and then they just promoted him to VP. I mean, to me, it sounds like there's seriously a number of concepts there where you literally stumped him. You pinned him for sharing everything that he knew, and there wasn't any more that he had. So he basically diverted course to, okay, well, you have your options now of what you can do with this information. That's a diversionary tactic in and amongst itself. Okay, well, I guess, take this information, do what you want with it, I'll see it in court. And that's unfortunately what so many bankers can do, because they know that it's going to be a lot of time and resources on your part based on what you submitted in order to try to bring that to the Attorney General's office or what have you.
And also to the people listening, if you want to hear another conversation along these lines with a banker, Bob and Brian both put a post up on their blogs with a banker that was taken in a pub, and he's sitting there somewhat anonymously. But it was a great conversation, and he admits in that conversation that it is actually against the law for them not to accept.
I actually have the promissory note transcript part pulled up. You want me to read through it here real quick?
Yeah,
pretty short. So the background here is that there's a group of people from getoutofdebtfree.org that interviewed this banker. He agreed to do this interview in a pub so long as they would make his bank that he worked for as well as his name and voice anonymous, which they did. And then he just answered every question that they had for him, very candidly so as well. So one of the people asked, I've got a question. If I were to approach the bank with a promissory note, now essentially anybody can create a promissory note. So go, create your own. You can get a promissory note. You can download one online. If I were to approach the bank with a promissory note, what would you do? And the bank manager says, by law, it has to be accepted because we can put it through the Bank of England. Now, here in the United States, we would have the Federal Reserve Bank. And then the guy responds, so if I came into the bank with a promissory note, you would accept it for value. And he said, well, we've got to, haven't we? And then he starts to go, well, and then the person said, well, it goes back to 1882. And the banker says, I know. And the person says, the Bills of Exchange Act. And the bank manager says, precisely. And he says, you are saying you have to accept promissory notes. This is the response I love. And the bank manager says, well, by law we do. Of course we do. And then the guy asks, what constitutes a promissory note? And the bank manager says, it is a note with your signature and it outlines your precise promise and intentions. That's about all it is. That's effectively all it is. And then the person responds, can someone sell a promissory note? And he says, yeah, in theory, of course you can. It doesn't happen because everything is marked in risk. It doesn't happen. You wouldn't accept it, would you? You just wouldn't accept it if I did that to you. That's why we moved into the realm of contracts. And the person replies, the thing about the promissory note is you've got to have two parties, one giving, one accepting, and plus a signature on it for it to be accepted as a promissory note. And the manager says, it has to be observed, yes. The person responds, so if the accepting party is saying, actually, no, I'm not going to have that, I'm not going to third party on that, it's no longer a promissory note. And the manager says, one person can observe both parties. And he says, so in a real-life situation, imagine someone actually came into your branch with their promissory note that they'd made, that they've done it correctly, etc. This is essentially what Bob did. They've gone to the counter to see the bank tellers. What the hell is this? They call the manager. You come along. You look at this thing. He's done a legitimate promissory note. What are you going to do? And the bank manager replies, I'm going to break the law, aren't I? And not accept it. And the person responds, you're going to break the law? The manager says, yes. And the guy says, because otherwise your job's on the line. And he said, yeah, I wouldn't accept it. And the guy says, can I take the matter further then? I could say you failed to accept this. I'm well within my right to take it to higher levels. And the manager says, that would be interesting to see. And then they close it out by saying, yeah, that's pretty much the end of it. So basically the bank manager says, by law we have to accept those things. But I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to break the law. He just downright can't make it any more clear. It's not an acceptable practice in bank trade and finance, although it is the law. We're just not going to allow it. Point blank. What else do you really need to hear?
Yeah, we've found the Australian legislation that actually nominates promissory notes as money. It's in the legislation and it's backed up by the Bills of Exchange Act. It's actually in there and quite easy to find, and it'll be the same template across all of the countries that are operating under this system. And the real issue that we have is that if they refuse it and we take it higher, knowing that the bank's a corporation, the legal system's a corporation, the government's a corporation, they all co-owned by the same folks. It's that threshold we've got to push past. In fact, my question to Bob was, you mentioned going to a grand jury. How would you actually go about that?
Well,
What's the mechanism in the US?
You'd have to form a grand jury out of private citizens. I mean, it's a long process, and honestly, it's probably not. It's not over. He asked for 7 to 10 days to send the letter, meaning he's going to go back to the legal team. Because basically what happened was, and I'm reading into this, he was sent to try to head me off to see if I would relent. When I didn't, he needs more time. He's going back because he's not going to want to send that letter. Because if he dishonors it, I do have recourse. They can get their license pulled.
Yep.
Good point. Bob, is this the bank that you did that procedure with last year?
Yes, one of the banks, yes.
Yeah, okay, so this is the second knock on their door from your perspective? Or would you call it the first knock on their door?
It might be the second or third. But even on the first time, when I asked the first time, they said no, and I asked the second time, they said no, and when I asked the third time, they came back and apologized, and then they tried to do it. So this comes to that whole knock 3 times thing.
I was going to bring that up.
Yep, that's where we're going.
And we've been told this by many different... Lisa, do you want to tell the story from your perspective? Because it sounds better coming from you.
Do you want me to start with the flashing light? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell the whole story for context.
Okay. Well, if you've been down this road and looked at trust law and all of these things for a while, you've probably come across the occult aspects of it where they say you need to ask 3 times. This 3 times business keeps coming up. And even in a courtroom where a judge will get up and leave the room, and when he comes back in, he's changed the jurisdiction of the court, and he can do that 3 times. We've got a guy here in Australia who's probably the expert in Australia on trust law, and he says the same thing. Whenever you approach the system, you need to do it 3 times. They are, through their own rights and rituals, obligated to turn you down the first 2. So just using that as a bit of a background, I was up on the Gold Coast last week for a One People meeting. And after the meeting, I went back to my host, Scott and Lee's house, and we were sitting outdoors in an entertaining area that they've got that sort of moves out to the backyard. And the 3 of us were sitting around a bar, and we were all facing a different direction. And out of nowhere, there was a flash of light that I made the joke, have you got photographers lurking in your garden? Because it was like one of those old flash bulbs from an old camera, say from the 70s or something, that just bang, lit up the whole area, lit up the yard, lit up where we were. And it looked like it came, for me, from the right-hand corner of the yard, out of the corner of my eye. For Scott, it was from the other corner of the yard. And for Lee, who was facing the house, it looked like it came from inside the house. And it was very bizarre. But so here we've got this flash of light and 3 people. 2 days later, I'm back home and I'm talking to Bob and Chris about this process that he's going through with his declaration of value in the bank. And Bob mentions that the song Knock 3 Times has been playing in his head for a few days. So we're playing with the idea of, does he need to go back to the bank 2 more times? When suddenly he gets this flash of light in his living room, but he gets 3 flashes. And he wasn't alone. How many people were in the living room at the time?
It was just me and my nephew at the time.
Okay. 3 quick flashes in succession. Then, so that seemed like confirmation. Here's another set of 3s. And then Chris remembers having a conversation with Julian where he asked Julian how many Kiris would it take to make this happen. And Julian answered without hesitation, 3. So then instead of, with the conversation evolves to perhaps it's not Bob having to do it 3 times, but maybe it's 3 different people. And we had Kiri, we have Bob, and it was like, who's next? But as we sort of workshopped this idea a little bit more, we realised that Heather had actually done it first. So Bob was actually number 3, not number 2. And in a sense, it's been done. Is that everything? What am I supposed to say about that? Okay. But this theme of 3 is really playing a big part for me at the moment. It's really becoming, what's the word? It's illuminating. It's illuminating. I'm finding this theme. And now we're looking, and this, I guess, can move into the conversation around HSBC too. You know, there was 2 bits of information in particular for me in regards to HSBC that I thought were interesting. One was in part of what Dee wrote on her blog, where she listed all of the things, all of the holdings, all of the companies that HSBC owns.
Oh, I'll put
And
the post up for that.
Extensive list.
Yeah.
But one of them is Swift. Now, if you know anything about banking, you know that each bank, each branch has to have a Swift code. And it's because that's how they transfer money between branches and banks, is through using this Swift code as their identifier. And there are small private banks around the world who have been trying to get up and off the ground for years, but the Swift system will not give them a Swift code. So they can't interact with any other banks because they won't comply with the Federal Reserve System. The fact that HSBC owns that
sounds like a universal size conflict of interest, if you ask me.
You think? Yeah.
Yeah, they call it a monopoly. It's
the fact that even that is a private corporation that is owned by a bank itself is just extraordinary.
Yeah. It's just a gatekeeping mechanism. They can keep out any organisation who would not play their game. Simple.
Exactly. And the other piece that really caught my attention was the fact that HSBC is closing down all Vatican and embassy accounts. There's a couple of ways of looking at this, and for me the big question right now is HSBC going through the initial stages of accepting the people's offer to repurpose? That's what I'm looking at, and that's what I'm wondering.
It's a good question.
It is. And before I forget, Bob, one of the other things your banking pal didn't actually deny was the foreclosure. If you go to a banker and say you're all foreclosed, you would expect him to go,
Wait a second.
Wait a second, that's a load of whatever. He didn't. Not a thing.
At that point, he went dead silent. When I told him he was implicating himself in treason.
Yeah, that was very silent. He dropped there. Really quiet.
Well, it's obvious there's a reason why. I just like hearing the way Lisa says HSBC. It's more of a HSBC. There's a reason why HSBC keeps coming into the media. I think it's pretty telling that you have the Vatican Bank and all of these embassy banks. It's a very unprecedented event. This has never happened before, and there's a lot of speculation as to why it's happening. The funniest part is these account holders are now scrambling, and they can't get any other bank to accept their account. Now, as a bank, somebody that does a lot of business, that wants to transfer back and forth an extreme amount of transactions and transfers, you beg for those accounts as an institutional bank. The fact that they're refusing them, it just blatantly says, without them coming out and saying it, that the deceptive acts of their accounts and the types of transactions that they're doing are just borderline are just blatantly not trustworthy. So you have to really there was a article that I put out. I think I just shared the link. HSBC is claiming that they have 5 criteria that they here's the 5 criteria to satisfy in order to consider taking on any client for that matter, and it's international connectivity, economic development, profitability, cost efficiency, and liquidity. And they're not really.
What does
saying
any of that
much
mean?
more about it. Yeah, exactly. They're not really saying anything much more about it. This particular article makes a joke about HSBC's tagline being, I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. But anyways, the fact that they're getting rid of all of these accounts, and it's so close to that papal decree that just came out, September 1st thing, and the fact that one of them is the Vatican, I'm going to be really honest. I get really confused when I start to put all those pieces together, because it sounds like that particular pope has essentially, in a way, taken a shotgun and shot his own foot off. But who knows? September 1st is only a few weeks away.
And this also comes out at the same time as apparently a lot of embassies are closing around the world. So what's the connection there? Is it because they can't afford to pay their expenses? Is it because they haven't got a bank working with them in order to pay their expenses?
Or we've heard in the past that HSBC was on the chopping block. And being that they fund all the embassies, perhaps the fact that they were about to do this was the reason why they were on the chopping block. If they had been chopped before all this happened, then they would be in no position to do that. But maybe this was something that was foreseen and they were going after HSBC because they were about to basically pull the financial carpet from underneath everyone.
Well, Heather mentioned on a call, what did we do? A call a month ago, maybe? Not even? Where she talked about HSBC being the quote-unquote sacrificial lamb in all of this. I'd say
Which is
that...
why the call-out to HSBC went out in the first place, it's right. You have an opportunity here to work with the people and not be the sacrificial lamb.
Yeah.
That's a test for the people at the top of HSBC.
Wow. I wouldn't want to be in Gulliver's shoes right now.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. What I do know, and we talked about this a little bit before the call, they're claiming that all the, I can't remember the quantity, the count of embassies that are allegedly closing down, but it's a lot. It's not just a couple. It's like quite a few of them. And they're claiming it's because it's a security precautionary measure because Al-Qaeda is the biggest threat that they've been since 9/11. I mean, oh my gosh, I feel bad for the people out there that believe that story because it's just such a clear misrepresentation of the truth. It's absolutely not what it is. I'd say them being running out of money to pay for it is probably just one very small element of that equation. But then you have to ask yourself, with our signatures giving them the ability to create all this fictional money, how on earth there was an element in this. Chris, Bob, Lisa, you probably know the answer to this, but there's an element of the filings that Heather did in 2012. It kind of stopped the faucet of their ability to, considering the UC, everybody's been at, and this is probably a good place to address it now. Since I put out the articles about last week about proof all your debt is prepaid and your birth certificate was made into a bond that's worth billions, I've gotten a lot of emails of people asking me how do they claim access to their strawman account. There's a lot of people out there that'll say, go fill out a UCC1 filing, but the December 25th filing that the One People's Public Trust did with Heather, Caleb, and Randall essentially filed all those financing statements on behalf of every single person in the world, giving them access to their strawman account, taking away the ability of the Federal Reserve to monetize through that Treasury account that's been set up since we were each given a birth certificate. Bob, that's pretty much how it went down.
That were given back to us, yes.
It was given back to us, yes. So
and they can't access them anymore.
Yes.
It was secured for us in equity, and they can't use it anymore because it was secured by a superior claim from the people. It's a spiritual position in the end. You hit the high end of the banking system, and you're into honor and equity, and that's one thing that they have to have at some point in their system. They have to have a basis in some source of real value, and it was just chopped. They just got chopped off from it. That's what actually happened to them.
I mean, I might be oversimplifying things, but it sounds like they're playing, if I can't have it, either can you. So because their ability to access those funds was cut off, they won't, and what essentially given back to us, and now they're not playing ball, letting us access them.
Well, plus that, because they have control over the media and over the core elements of the system, they can play that game for a while all of the real value that they had left in their system dries up, which appears, if you're looking at the way they're closing embassies, why the hell would they do that? The threat from Al-Qaeda is obviously nothing like what they've been talking about. It has to be monetary. It has to be they've just run out of money. Shut them down.
I don't even want to start the conversation about what Al-Qaeda actually is. So. No,
it's actually irrelevant. It's just part of the spin. It's just the excuse they put out in public, and all that demonstrates is the degree to which they're still hypnotising the public with the spin.
Yeah.
So, anything else around the HSBC discussion before we move on to something else?
I have nothing else to say about HSBC.
Yeah, and I had one thought about the Vatican move to actually chop off support, chop off protection for their corporate employees, i.e. priests, etc. as of September the 1st. And in the same way that HSBC is the sacrificial lamb, they made Pope Joey the Rat the sacrificial pope and brought in supposedly this new guy. I'm just wondering whether they're going to have a management clean out inside the Vatican so they can attempt to make themselves look a bit more legitimate before the real truth comes out.
Getting back to the prophecy of Malachi and this being the last pope, I mean, part of that prophecy says that the what is it? How does it put it? The city of 7 hills or something. What's it called? What's Rome called?
This would be a Bob question.
The city of 7 hills. Yep, I think that's
7 hills will burn. And I mean, he can be the last pope for a number of reasons. He can be the demise of the Vatican in a number of ways. Is it because it's a clean out, and he's here to clean it out? I mean, I've always felt that all of these prophecies of the end times have been their prophecies about their end times, not ours.
Yeah. You know, and Heather, we've talked about it with Heather on calls before. I think that one of the biggest tells is that that archbishop that had that artwork stolen, and he called. He didn't call the Swiss Guard. He called the actual Roman police or whatever, and then they found all that stolen art inside of his house. I mean, there's something huge to say about that. Anybody that really takes a step back and looks at that for a second, there's something really strange about that. When you have this Swiss Guard at your fingertips, and you call the Roman police and you have a bunch of stolen artwork that's like priceless art throughout your house, you're basically you're lynching yourself in that situation. So, well,
that's where we speculated that he was a walk-in, and that's happening right across the board.
Well, you know, there is biblical prophecy about this time, and it also said that, you know, it referred to that Babylon the Great would crumble. Babylon the Great being the beast, so to speak. But it said that it would come from events because I myself will place it in their hearts to do so.
Nice one. Nice pickup.
So you're talking, you know, there are energies that are pouring into the earth right now and from the sun that we've never seen before. We've never even classified the type of energy that they've been reading coming into the earth and from the earth. There's unclassified. This is an energy that they've never seen before, and it's penetrating everything. It's changing people, and this is, I think, what Heather would call enforcement. Because Source itself is enforcing this.
Forcing it inwards, sure. And there's one other aspect to that cardinal that was caught with the artwork. Now, the Italian police are renowned, absolutely renowned, for being corrupt and in everybody's pockets. Yet, not only did this guy call them, they came and did their job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, enforcement.
Can you come up with any more quotes? Because I love them. You just picked the perfect one.
There's. Go ahead.
Go on. No, go on.
I was just gonna say there's people that we put out a couple of blog posts recently. Well, Dee and her awesome research team. If there's any of Dee's research team listening to this call, you guys are awesome. They also came up with all the graphs. Dee put out that post. A chart is worth 1,000,000 words, and it shows the.
Brian, I just want to, that is one of the best posts I've seen on graphically showing the system. If you haven't seen it yet, folks, take a really close look at it. It's beauty. Yeah,
it's I've never seen the ties. You know, as an example for Monsanto, they showed 2 circles. One on one side shows the political positions, you know, senator, governor, you know, House of Representatives, whatever, and then the other side shows positions within Monsanto, and then the circles meet, and in the inside circle it shows the person, and they hold a role. They're the senator of Delaware, but they're also the vice president of Monsanto. And there's like multiple of these charts. It's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it is.
But there's one of these posts. Oh shoot! Now that we went off on a tangent. Now I can't even remember what post I was talking about. Oh, that's right. It was the. There's a couple that came out with showing the connection between the Roman Curia and England, the Crown of England, and the United States of America Corporation. Does anybody know those connections well enough to follow the trail of control all the way back to the Vatican so they can speak to it? Because I've gotten a couple blog emails to my blog and comments saying that people are having trouble finding those connections. Bob, Chris?
Well, if the United States is a non-profit religious organization owned by Archbishop whatever his name was, well, that's a direct connection right to the Vatican, which means that any employee of that corporation must report to the bishop who reports to the Vatican. So they're all employees under Roman Curia law, and that includes the president being the president of that corporation.
One of the other bits of information about the American system, I've heard this from a couple of sources, and getting these things verified is difficult, but that the Queen of England actually owns the District of Columbia. Okay, the British royal family. So, I mean, there's multiple connections in the control system. It's one of the characteristics of the control system is the control mechanism is diffused and hard to find. So it's sort of there's a direct connection between the Vatican Church and all sorts of corporations like NASA, like the CIA. They have heavy influence there. And there's this cross-ownership with the royal families, including the Queen. Very convoluted. But all roads keep leading back to Rome, because if you remember, if you've ever seen any film of the current Queen's coronation, guess who's sitting in the church right up the front near the Queen? It's the Pope. And I think he actually participated in the ceremony at one point too, if I remember rightly.
And
why is that? I mean, she runs her own church. What the hell's the Pope doing at her coronation? I could never work it out at the time. What's going on there?
Somebody asked the question why that Delaware document was incorporated as 1987. Good question. A lot of times what corporations will do when all those corporate entities that I was trying to get funding for a business of mine back in 2009 at one point, and they were explaining us the process of doing shell corporations. Essentially what you do in that situation is you take a corporation that's gone out of business, but they have the books to show that they've been in good standing and profitable and what have you for 10 years, and you essentially buy that shell to allow yourself the credit history to get loans. And believe it or not, this process is legal. And essentially you can take no-name corporations and grandfather them into corporations that have corporate history, and one becomes the other. Now, corporations have the ability to reincorporate under a new set of standards anytime that they want to. So I imagine that 1987 move in Delaware was some kind of strategic play, and there's a lot more to that story as to why it's just the ridiculousness of that document is just astounding. That the United States of America is registered as a non-profit religious organization in Delaware in 1987. I mean, pinch me, is this real? It's almost so far-fetched, but the documentation, the proof is all right there. But I bet if somebody really decided they wanted to track that and dig deeper on that, Heather probably has the answer, I would imagine. We haven't talked to her in a while on these calls.
And another but perplexing situation is the Commonwealth of Australia. And when Uwe and Scott have been doing a lot of searching around the SEC database, and they have found no less than 12 registrations of variations of that name and scattered across different states in America, including one that appeared to be deliberately misspelled. And I can't help but wonder if they're laundering money through all of these different corporations under that name, that government departments in different parts of our actual supposed sovereign structure here are putting money back to their own little version of Commonwealth Australia in different states of the United States.
It's not even that too.
It's just a giant spider's web of energy sucking.
And that documentary, what was it called? Our System, Our Structure, Our Illusion. That even shows that each county is incorporated, each politician is listed on Dun & Bradstreet, judges are listed on Dun & Bradstreet, courthouses are listed on Dun & Bradstreet. So you have all of these alleged governments or corporations masquerading as governments set up, but also fractionalized so they can increase their profitability. And where does all that money come from? From us.
Exactly.
When we break our speeding tickets, when we get convicted of crimes, our property taxes, income tax, food tax, registration on your automobile.
Speaking of absolutely ludicrous taxes, Chris, did you see this on Australian news? They are discussing introducing a license to smoke cigarettes.
Well, I was looking at that and wondering whether you had to, because I only saw it flash across the screen, and I was wondering whether you had to show your driver's license or you had to buy a license. So you're telling me you have to buy a license?
To smoke in order to buy cigarettes, and a police officer, if you are smoking in the street, will be able to come up to you and say, "Where's your license to smoke?"
Well, it's about damn time. I'm just kidding.
I laughed so hard.
I can but groan.
Wow.
And there was a pensioner in the suburb that I live in, under the local council that I live, a pensioner who had a front fence replaced, and the guy who replaced it built it about 2 inches too tall, which put it out of planning because apparently you have to replace like with like, and the height was 2 inches wrong, so they slapped a multi-$1,000 fine on this poor pensioner. Okay, when you could probably run a saw across the top of the fence and reduce its height by 2 inches if you had to. But yet they chose to harass this poor woman with a huge fine, and it is utterly ridiculous. And I was trying to work out, Lisa, yesterday, which one, and I said, no, surely they couldn't possibly be making a license, wanting a license to smoke cigarettes.
Renewable, yearly, of course.
That's
unbelievable.
It's a good illustration for a story, though, Chris. That story with the fence is that the reason why. I mean, a normal person could look at that, and normal is probably not person to use. Let's say sane, as opposed to insane person, can look at that or look at that legislation regarding cigarettes, or look at the situation where the person gets stuck with some astronomical fee. And in the past, we would just lay down and say, well, shit, I have to pay it. I have to pay that. The government says I owe that money. I have to pay that $5,000. And I think that now the level to which the ridiculousness has been running rampant, I mean, it's just beyond crazy at this point. You have people now saying, wait a second, screw that. I'm sorry. There is absolutely no way I'm paying you $5,000 because I built my fence an inch too high. And I think that that just is a representation of the energy that we're in right now, is that it's becoming so far-fetched that even the average person that maybe a year ago would have just ponied up the dough, they're saying, wait a second, there's absolutely no way I'm going to continue this. It's just
the saying
not going to
that
happen.
the inmates running the asylum is what keeps going through my head at the moment.
That's a pretty good one.
Like this.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that is just it. And they're actually just tightening. It's the slow boil. It's the lobster in the pot of cold water, and we're just now realizing it's getting kind of hot in here. Who's got their hand on the gas tap?
My Brittany and I, we went and saw this movie called Fruitvale Station this weekend, and it's based on a true story. And some people in California probably remember this story. It's the 22-year-old kid. There was a fight that broke out on a subway, and got broken up pretty quickly or whatever. But as soon as the subway stopped, everybody tried to get off and go their separate ways, and the police basically manhandled these kids that were involved. And the movie was the story of this kid's life, and he had a daughter and so on and so forth. Good kid, just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But somebody caught this whole scene on their cell phone and they recorded it. And the recording shows, 3 or 4 officers manhandling 4 or 5 black guys in a subway. And they're holding one guy down, and all of a sudden the officer pulls out his gun and shoots the guy in the back while he's down, and kills him. And he gets rushed to the hospital, and he lives for about a half a day, maybe 12 hours. And it was I'm bawling my eyes out watching this movie, because knowing it's based on a true story. And they did the the movie, the way that they did it is they showed his life for, going back, in flashbacks over a couple years, but mostly just the day before, leading up to this New Year's Day event. And the officer was released, and he had to go to court for first-degree murder. And he was able to get first-degree murder reduced to, what is it when you kill somebody by accident? Vehicular manslaughter, because he said that he thought his gun was his taser. And he went from first-degree murder down to vehicular manslaughter, and he was out in 11 months. And it was one of the saddest. I walked out of that movie theater, bawling my eyes out, thinking, I told Brittany, I said, if anybody asks why I'm doing what I'm doing, this is why.
Exactly.
Because this kind of stuff, our justice system letting a murderer go that just shoots this guy in the back. And they showed the video footage that this person caught on their cell phone. You clearly see the guy is down on the ground. One officer has their knee in his back and his face just pushed against the ground, and another officer just grabs his gun and shoots him in the back.
Brian, to what extent did that inflame the racial situation when that event occurred?
Oh, there's riots in the street, burning of cars. It just got real dirty in Oakland and in San Francisco for a few weeks. I remember it, but I didn't. This happened back in 2010, but it did a lot. This documentary, it's getting a lot of attention right now. It's really doing a lot to raise awareness to how corrupt police officers are and how ridiculously ass backwards our judicial system is, considering you have this murderer who gets off spending less. I'm sure he's probably in protective, whatever they call when they send somebody away and give them a phony name, because I'm sure this guy's got a target on his back for what he did. But
Anyone mind if I change the tone?
Oh, please. Yeah.
It's 11:11. Let's lighten up a little.
Thank you.
Please do.
I just want to put a shout out to the One People Gold Coast group, because what they did last week was extraordinary. They invited me up to attend a meeting, because they get together once a fortnight, I think, and it's a really strong, beautiful community up there of the One People getting together, doing meetups. And I was invited to attend, and they ambushed me. Scott, I know you're listening. When I got there, it was quite funny, because they were setting up the chairs for this meeting. And I've been to a couple of the Sydney ones, and essentially it's a group of us sitting around in a circle and just sharing stories and talking and asking each other questions, and I thought it was going to be like that. But as they're setting up the chairs, it's this semicircle, rows and rows of chairs facing the front of the room, and there's a podium at the front. And I was like, what's going on? And they're like, well, you'll be up there, and we'll all be over here. And I was like, oh, my Lord. I've never spoken in...
Yes, I was going to say, never in public.
I don't do public speaking. I mean, this is what I do here on these radio shows is very different. And Scott did do... he sent out an email recently giving his account of the events, and he had me running out for coffee and cigarettes every 5 minutes to try and calm my nerves, but I don't think I was that bad. But and we had an amazing night, and it was such an honor to be in a room full of people who were on the same page, all coming from a place of love, all coming from a place of solution-focused, all having nothing but love and appreciation and hope, predominantly directed at me, which was overwhelming, but also for each other, everybody else in the room. And it was just beautiful. And I really want to thank Scott and Lee for organising it and for putting me up for the night. And they presented me at the beginning of the night with what they called the Lighthouse Award. And it was beautifully framed, and it was presented to the bridge crew, to Heather and Caleb and Randall, to Scott and Ken, and to each and every one of you who are shining the light and leading the way. And I want you to know that this wasn't just for me, and it wasn't just for the crew here. It was for each and every one of you. And it was appreciation from this particular group who get together on the Gold Coast in Queensland every couple of weeks. So just want to say that. It's there for you too. You have been acknowledged for the work that you're doing, for the light that you're shining, and for the path that you're illuminating for others. You're not going unnoticed.
You should read that Lighthouse Awards, considering it is for everybody.
Let's also mention the designer. There's a designer up there who's supporting them really well, doing all of their material.
Rudy, yes. I can't actually remember Rudy's last name, but Rudy's a member of this group.
I was just trying to look it up, but yes, it's Rudy, yeah. And
he has done... They've created some amazing... they've actually got a great website called theonepeoplenow.com.
I have the link. I'll share it in the chat room. Looks like Scott Kennedy's in the chat room right now. You can give him a shout out.
Hey, Scott. Thank you. This is the website this particular group's put together. And you can all actually use it as a resource. Oh, you did. Thank you. But it's theonepeoplenow.com for those listening.
Speaking of meetup groups, while I'm remembering, Joyce Paulson, who is part of our transcribing team, is out in Boise, Idaho, I believe, and she wants to have a meetup group in her area. So she's putting a call out. Her name is Joyce Paulson. And I tell you, what Lisa experienced at the Gold Coast, these meetup groups are really a great way to meet new people, to form a bit of a community, to get to know each other. And her contact details is grandmother123@msn.com, and her phone number I will place in the chat room. She wanted me to share that with you guys. If anyone is in that area, Boise, Idaho.
What's come out of this Gold Coast group is, they're actually doing projects together. They've put this website together. They're talking about community and looking for properties. I mean, this group have come together and they're really doing a lot of work together, and it's beautiful to see. And everyone's bringing their own unique talents and gifts and experiences to the group and offering what they can. And Rudy's, as an example, he does graphic design and he works a lot with sacred geometry, and you'll see all of the artwork and all of the documents that they've created. You'll see examples of his design work. Beautiful stuff. And actually, while we're on this subject as well, I think we've got, I'm just going to check, 864. I'm just going to see if this is Linda. Linda, is that you?
That's me.
864? It is you.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Hey.
Now you're getting together with Randy, aren't you?
Absolutely. Yes, I just got off the phone with him a little while ago. I've got allergies. I'm like you. I can hardly talk. But anyway, he's so excited he's beside himself, and we've even got people from Alabama, a whole group wanting to come up, and I don't know who else. So I told him I need to make the announcement so people can write to me, because I've only got 10 rooms right now, and we may need more. So we've got 10 double rooms at the motel there in Asheboro, and it will be for Saturday night and Sunday night, Labor Day weekend. And there's a campground close by called Zooland Family Campground if people want to camp. So anyway, my email address is Livacy, L-I-V as in Victor, E, S as in Sam, A-Y, 51 at yahoo.com. So in order to get coordinated, guys, you need to send me an email.
I'm just going to repeat that. Live Say is how I would say it. Livesay 51. Is that right?
At yahoo.com. That's correct. At yahoo.com. All right. Oh, you guys.
So if anybody wants to go down and see Randy on the Labor Day weekend, be part of a huge group from all over that are going down there. Where is it again?
Asheboro, North Carolina.
Asheboro, North Carolina. Then please send an email to Linda at livesay51@yahoo.com and be part of that group. That's exciting. Congratulations, Randy.
I'm jealous.
Very exciting. Well, I'm jealous. I want to be in New Zealand in 2 weekends, but,
yeah.
I also want to be in Morocco in October, but, I put it out there. We'll see.
I think there's going to be a lot of movement happening around the planet, but
I know.
I think we've actually probably got Randy as well. I'm pretty sure Randy's 336, isn't he?
Well, and I wanted to tell you, probably this isn't the place to do it. I sent Brian email a link to the Intentional Communities Directory, and I intended to give that to everybody because there are thousands of them all over the planet. And when we went to community, we found our community, our spiritual community, from that book, and spent 4.5 years there.
Wow.
Sorry, I just need to let 336, you're live.
Hey, Linda,
thank you.
Is that you, Randy? Randy,
hey.
Well, you can say hello to Linda. She's on the line.
Real quick, hey, Linda.
Hello, Linda.
My email, Linda, before I forget, can you send that again? I don't know if I got that email or if I didn't respond to you, but I want to check that out.
Yes, you did, but it was a while back, and I'm going to send it again because it's just a fabulous resource.
Awesome.
Okay?
Thank you, Linda. And hello, Randy.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Brian.
Hi,
Hey, Linda.
Well, tell them how excited you are, guy.
Oh, my God, I can't believe it. I'm so excited for all these people to want to get together with me. And I'm doing my very best to make sure
Randy.
that... You what?
I said build it and they will come. Look at that.
Exactly. I'm working it out so everybody has a comfortable place to sleep. So if everybody will get in touch with Linda and let her know if you're coming and when you're coming, we'll make sure everybody has food and a place to sleep.
Well,
I'm sure you're going to have a blast.
We're gonna, and Lisa, you said you might show up. Randy, you don't know that.
What's that?
Oh.
Lisa, Lisa, are you really coming to America, Lisa? And she said you never know, or something like that. Show up, Brian.
That's
Wonder Woman's coming.
No limits.
It's quite the road trip.
No limits. The whole crew ought to come. The whole crew ought to come. We'll just take up the whole motel, right, Randy?
Road trip this week anyway, so
I'll just have the whole hotel booked.
Yeah, let's do the whole thing.
Now he's talking.
Well, guys, thank you for calling in and sharing the details. I'm sure we'll get an update from you as we get closer, and certainly a roundup of how the weekend went.
Is that this coming weekend?
No,
Labor Day weekend.
Labor Day weekend. Okay, well, awesome.
Saturday night.
And
hey, Randy.
Yeah.
You better take lots of good pictures, my man. That's your responsibility. I'm delegating you.
Okay.
So.
Okay. I tell you what, Linda and I were talking earlier. The weekend of September 1st is that weekend, and it's amazing that we're all going to be together.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, nice timing.
Well, listen, I don't want to hang up without telling you guys, every one of you, how much I love you and everybody in the chat. I haven't been in the chat because I've been paying too much attention to what y'all are saying, but we love you, okay?
Thank you.
Love you too.
It's usual, darling.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks for calling, Linda. And Randy.
Me.
Bye, guys.
Sounds like Randy's
I love you
gathering
guys.
the crew.
You
we
too.
love you too, man.
Here's Randy.
Hey, can I make one real quick announcement? There's somebody that's trying to connect with anybody that's listening from Israel. His name is Kevin Schlosser. His email is kev_sk@hotmail.com. There you go, Kevin.
Can you type it into the chat room too?
I will do that.
While we're talking about events, I'll remind everybody of the Opal Global Village meeting weekend after this coming one. This is for Australians and New Zealanders. Anyone else who can jump on a plane and fly here. 17th and 18th, weekend of the 17th to the 18th. The web address is www.opalglobalvillage, all one word. That's OPAL globalvillage.com. It's a simple 1 or 2 page website with a form that you can put in to notify them that you'd like to be there. Looks like there's between 30 and 40 people coming. So it's going to be a really excellent meeting. And that includes Holly Tucker. In fact, I've got an announcement for the IUV I must not forget today. And possibly Hope Girl. Hope Girl's actually running a GoFundMe campaign, which is www.gofundme.com/3TWRK. It's 3TWRK. Or just search GoFundMe.com for Hope Girl. She's coming to here specifically to talk to people about their projects. She's got quite a few people running projects in Australia, wants to come and give them personal sessions to actually get their stuff up and running on the platform they've created, which is a combination project funding, a crowdsourcing project funding plus project management platform. Really good stuff. So if you can donate something to get Hope over, that would be fantastic. And she's also looking for accommodation and assistance moving around with however people can. So be tremendous. And if she can squeak it in, she will come to the Lake Conjola meeting, which would be excellent. Be able to talk to a whole bunch of people all at once.
Just a suggestion in the chat room, and I will do that. I do have a digital copy of that Lighthouse Award. I will get that posted on the 5D Media Facebook page and the 5dmedia.com, medianetwork.com website. So I'll do that, and you can all have a look at it.
And the last little thing I wanted to mention, Lisa, if I could just take one more sec here, is a couple of items that Holly wanted to promote on Nova Earth News on the IUV.com. One article is called Elevator Joy Bomb, and I'm not sure what that means, but it sounds good. And another one on self-reliance in Los Angeles. They're both stories of good news and inspiration. So check out Nova Earth News. They're doing a very diligent job of just pulling in those good stories that we like. And there's some really great courtesy notice stories appearing. You know, people have really got some traction on some of the stuff they're doing. And they're worth reading up as well.
Okay, anything else before we move on to what we know in regards to Kiri? Before we move on to that, we got anything else?
All good.
Nothing major. Kiri sent a message to me on Facebook saying she's out, she's with her family. You know, we've heard some pretty nasty stories about how she was treated when she was in jail. But she's taking a couple days to get her bearings back in order and to be with her family. And I believe she has a follow-up court case sometime in October. But all the details, let's just put it this way, no concrete details as far as the arrangement that's been made or what the deal is when she goes back to her court have been really disclosed yet. But she's given us the first, what'd she say, we get the people on this panel, whoever else wants to participate, what have you, are going to get the first interview that she does to get the word out. So probably within the next week or so, I imagine we'll have a follow-up interview with Kiri that we'll do. That's all I got.
Oh. Okay. Now, there was a mainstream media story saying that she pleaded guilty to 4 charges of fraud, totaling $65,000. Now, the story that I've heard, and there may be gaps in it, there may be some misunderstandings in it, but this is where I sit in terms of what's been told to me. As you, I think you guys know, Kiri
get that
did not.
freshener.
Sorry, Bob?
My mistake. I was talking to someone else.
She was removed. She wasn't actually in the courtroom last time. She was held out the back. She was removed from the courtroom and she was moved around continuously. Nobody knew where she was. Nobody could find out where she was. No one was being told where she was being held. When she finally did turn up to a courtroom, there was nobody there, including her lay representative, because they didn't know where she was. There was a court-appointed representative there who she didn't know and who she did not give consent to represent her, who pleaded guilty on her behalf with objections from Kerry. The charges are, as Kerry stated, within 24 hours her bank accounts were closed. Now, previous to that, she had issued personal checks to various companies, and she had the money in her account to cover those checks. But when the banks closed them, they then dishonoured those checks, and so the bank or somebody is now charging her with issuing checks fraudulently post her declaration of value attempt, which apparently was not brought up at all. So the initial charge of fraud in regards to depositing her value wasn't brought up in this final appearance in court. There's a final appearance in court just addressed to these checks. Now, she said they totaled $1,600, or when I say she, it didn't come directly from Kerry because Kerry wasn't available at the time, but totaled $1,600, and she had the amount. She had that covered in her accounts. Not $65,000. She doesn't even know where that figure's coming from. So it's all getting rather convoluted and quite interesting. But she doesn't have to go back to court until October. Now, maybe they're hoping the attention will die down between now and then. It won't. The people who are involved in this are making sure that doesn't happen. But that's where we're at right now. So, as I said, none of this has come directly from Kerry, but it's coming from others around her. And we'll hear directly from Kerry as soon as she's ready to actually talk. The other thing to cover is the interview that Mel V did, or the discussion that Mel V did with Heather and Dee, and some of the information that came out about that. Anybody got any comments on that one?
Yeah, the information about what Mr. Sino actually was down in Swisindo. I found that absolutely fascinating. How did you find it?
He's not in density.
No.
That makes a lot of sense.
No. Yeah, and that's well, look, I've kind of distanced myself from the whole thing because I couldn't make sense of the communications were just so strange. And hearing that information really cleared up, for me anyway, at this stage. And there might be, okay, there could be other things going on, but it explained why the communications were so strange with this particular group, and can continue to be strange as far as I can hang out. If they're dealing with a channeled entity, then there's really no one in charge, and there's no channeled entities that can really sign off on anything. So where does that leave that whole situation? What is going on down there? More information required. I'd love more information from them, but it's very, very difficult.
A lot of people would push this aside and say, oh, well, that's just silly. But on the high levels, someone is always in the Vatican. Someone's channeling someone, or if they're not in direct contact with someone who is off-world. And this is part that a lot of people will get uncomfortable with, but it is the reality of the situation.
Well, what it gets down to is, does Swisindo actually have are they signatories to the asset they claim to be? And
we've got a little echo.
Find that out. We have, someone.
Bob.
It's Bob. Yeah, just mute up, Bob. Yeah, if there's if there is a real signatory that the banking system recognises, and he happens to be channeling Mr. Sino, well, that's a pretty strange setup, but, you know, if it's his signature and they accept it, then he will have influence inside the banking system. That all remains to be seen, because they appear to have been trying to do things without success in terms of, you know, transferring and distributing things. The bank system appears to be resisting them. Probably more hotly than Bob was resisted by that gentleman he was speaking to earlier, but there's certainly a strong resistance there. Now, whether they overcome that, exactly what's going down in there, I'd really love to know. And we may find out at some stage.
Well, I like the way that Heather really kind of broke it down as far as essentially Swissendo being a piece of the puzzle, but they've never been the whole puzzle. You know, I was getting the majority of the updates from Marcosa, and you know, what really kind of threw me off over the whole situation is Marcosa got kicked out of the delegation because he was asking too tough of questions, and you know, as in a situation like that, I don't understand where the concern is as far as asking questions and wanting to know answers. So I think that as far as me personally, that where I stand on it now is the whole story hasn't yet to be told. I think there's something there. I don't think that there's as much there as maybe the delegation wants to believe. But then again, I'm not. No one's over there on the Swissendo side, and has from what I understand, have had any real density to density human interaction with anybody from their group. So it's really, to me, it seems like a lot of smoke and mirrors, and I think there's still a lot that needs to unfold before it's really going to make a whole lot of sense to anybody.
Yeah, so for those in the chat room who are confused and have a lot of questions around this, just go and listen to that conversation. It's on Dee's blog. She's also included a lot of Skype conversations that went on before and after it as well. But there seems to be people who are really confused. So essentially, they're attempting to get a delegation of 100 people from around the world, 5 people from each of the kingdoms that Swissendo have supposedly created, to represent the one people of the planet. And those people are coming together as a delegation to meet with the representatives of Swissendo in Indonesia sometime in the future, is what they're working towards. Now, my own personal opinion on this is that the Swissendo side of things is kind of irrelevant. I don't know if anything is really going to come out of any of that. For me, the potential that could come out of this is the fact that you've got, or hopefully will get, 100 really good people together, talking, getting some conversation started around changes, around repurposing, around moving forward, and something positive may come out of that.
I think you're absolutely right, Lisa. I think that there's a lot of thought going into some more advanced planning than we've certainly ever discussed on these shows, because we haven't had a chance to discuss that on these shows in any great depth. And I've seen a little bit of their documentation. Looks good. I like the thought. Obviously, there's room for everyone's opinion, but if we get some nice, well thought out documentary material that we could use under any circumstances, that's a really good thing, because that takes a lot of work to do. And the only other issue I have, this is my issue with the idea of a delegation, is that I would never let anyone else represent me. The delegation represent themselves. They can present a body of work which reflects the wishes of the one people, but they can't actually represent us as separate beings. They can only represent themselves. So the philosophy of the delegation, there is I mean, our view on it is at odds with possibly with Swissendo's view of what the delegation actually represents, and they can't sign off on anything in particular. Because
there's a contradiction there, because they can't represent the people based on the documents that were filed, which they are drawing on as their backing.
Correct. Correct. It would require consensus from the one people for anything to be real.
They would need an accommodation agreement between them and everybody on the planet.
Precisely.
Yeah,
precisely.
Exactly.
There's consensus. So there's all sorts of issues surrounding it, but it's, the guys on the delegations are banging away on the documentation, and full marks to them, because even if Swiss Indo itself turns out to be problematic or whatever, we'll still have that work available to us, and it will stand us in good stead in terms of future organisation. So. It's not a situation where it's a waste of time. That is not it at all, because 100 people doing stuff, that's the way to get things done. It really is.
Yes.
Now, the other thing people are in the chat room are asking about is any updates from Heather. The answer to that is kinda. Typical Heather speak. I was involved in a conversation with Heather and Dee a couple of nights ago.
You say that like it was an accident. I was involved in an accident. I was involved in a conversation with Heather.
They don't happen.
I didn't mean to make it sound like an accident. And yes, there is documentation coming out. I expect it this week. And there will be more information in that in regards to the September 1st date, which is interesting. I'm really, really pleased to hear that the gathering that's happening at Randy's place is also happening that weekend on the September 1st. It's significant, guys. That's kind of all I can say at this point, because I really don't have much more than that, other than Heather has been working on a range of documents, and they will be starting to come out this week, is what I understand. Did you guys get any more out of the conversation than that you think you can share?
I was wondering how you were going to share anything. Heather was especially cryptic in that conversation.
She was in fine esoteric form.
Yeah. I was just gonna say the exact same thing. I think you put it perfectly. I mean, what made me the most excited was hearing Heather talk about A, the significance of the September 1st date, and B, the fact that she's banging away on documents. I hate, and I know that there's a phobia around dates now, because we've gone over this so many times, but all information would lead us to believe that within the next week or so, give or take, that the events that Heather has been waiting for to transpire, because it's not a timing thing. She said it's an event-driven thing. She needs certain events to take place in order to set the stage for the documents to be released. It sounds like most of those have happened, and the last couple are going to be taking place within the next week or so, but everything is subject to change. But based on the tone of conversation, it sounded very promising. That's my take.
For those who are asking in the chat room, what's the significance of the 1st of September? Well, there's been a few events. We've got the Pope's, what do you call it?
Yep.
Say that again?
Motu proprio?
Motu proprio. Basically, coming into effect on September 1st, which removes the protection of protection from prosecution for anybody under Roman Curia law, which the whole corporate structure is. So it leaves the politicians and the bankers and everybody else, judges, open to prosecution.
So you have Bernanke, who's submitted his resignation for September 1st. You have Department of
Homeland Security, Napolitano.
Yeah, Napolitano for September 1st. And now you have all this other HSBC stuff coming out.
You have that Federal Reserve board member. She's resigned.
Yep.
As of September 1st.
Yep. And people are asking what events needed to take place. I'd say that a lot of what we're talking about now are those events, and there's probably others as well. You have to remember, everybody, the background that Heather has is in the top tier level of bank, trade, and finance. You know, rubbing shoulders with all of the. I mean, when Bob made that comment to Thomas, and he said a couple pay grades above you. Well, Heather's rubbed shoulders with the pay grades all the way at the top. So she's got her. she's got her feelers out, her little, her little contacts in all these arenas that she was able to keep when she left bank, trade, and finance that are feeding her all sorts of information. I'm sure a ridiculous amount of events that are taking place that are outside of mainstream media, much of which she doesn't even share with us. It's just for her own personal, her data and the sequence of events that she chooses to do things. But I'd say as far as visibility is concerned, we're seeing a lot of those events take place right now. So who knows exactly which ones need to transpire before the documents are ready. But as I've said before, I trust Heather knows what she's doing as far as sequencing of events are concerned, because look at everything that she's done in a perfect sequence already with all the filings. So,
well, also in regards to September 1st, there's a lot of talk in RV land and new financial system land that they're going to reintroduce the new financial system on September 1st.
Is Dee still working on the second part of that excellent article she was putting out?
She's constantly working on something.
I hope so. That was very good.
Also, another September 1st date is, according to the Basel III and the gold standard, all banks are supposed to be in compliance by September 1st.
And also, the banker that you spoke to, the vice president, the last female, let slip in that conversation that September 1st will be here before we know it.
Yep. That's a good one, too.
Yes, that was probably what she was referring to. Because she's sort of mainstream banking, senior management, that would be something that she'd be aware of.
And anybody that didn't listen to that call, that was the vice president, one of the other vice presidents of Bob's bank, when he first went into the bank to submit his documentation. She made a comment, well, September 1st will be here before. Kind of slipped it in, it sounded like.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what we just said, Brian. You weren't listening.
Oh.
I don't know where you were, but you weren't listening.
I was looking outside wondering, asking myself if I was going to go on a run after this call. I'll be honest. I'm sorry.
Okay. What else? We've only got, say, 14 minutes left of the show. Okay, Chris, maybe it's time to talk about what the changes that are happening. There's a lot of things going on, guys, and expansion is one of them. And we're in a situation now where there's too much to talk about, not enough time, not enough airtime, and so we're expanding, basically, and I'll let Chris pick it up from here.
Yep, because the conversations that we need to have that we aren't having are actually the sorts of conversations that are going on in amongst the delegation for Swissindo, and one of the things I hope to draw on in future shows is what those guys are actually doing, which would be great. I'm dropping a big hint out there, guys. But what I've decided to do is to pull back on time in the One People show, like this particular show, Collective Imagination, and to start up a new Blog Talk Radio account, which will double the amount of time per week that we can have this discussion amongst ourselves as the actual people who need to have it, to actually talk about new governance. The repurposing show is all about moving from the old paradigm to the new, and there's a whole lot of conversations that go alongside that about community development and the details of that new governance, because there's a point where the actual details of that new governance require a hell of a lot of time and thought and input from people outside of how you actually get there. And if you've been listening to the repurposing show, we've started on that journey. We're starting to go down the path of what's the destination. And sometime in the next couple of weeks, we'll split that conversation up as best we can, because you can't divide it completely into what the new will look like. And the other conversation will be, how do we get there? Like, we may not even split it up. We might just run 2 sessions per week and have the conversation all in the same context. Haven't quite decided yet. But look, the most likely title of the new entity will be the One People's Oneness Radio. I wanted to use Oneness Radio, but I found there's a couple of FM organisations of various kinds that use that term. So I've gone for the One People's Oneness Radio. And we hope to eventually fill up all of the most practical days. We'll be avoiding the air times of the 5D Media Network so that they don't cross over, which will give the most people the most opportunity to join in live, because it's in the end it's all about your opinion. And that's what's coming up. So given I can't spread myself infinitely thinly, I'll probably drop in on these shows occasionally. I hope, if you guys will have me on, that would be great. And apart from that, I hope to see as many people who are, because not everybody's interested in talking about the details of this new stuff. I do understand that, but some people, it really pings their radar and love having conversations with those people. Someone has to do this. So that's the news, folks. That's where we're headed. And one of the conversations we've had of late is when this thing starts to really expand, it is going to go at high velocity outwards in all directions. And I don't think we can possibly plan for exactly what's going to unfold, because we just don't know the order. But if we've got some of our ducks lined up and our thought reasonably in order, I think the voice that the one people phenomenon wants to put out to the mainstream will reach the mainstream. That's a really critical thing. And also just mention too, there's a little radio show on AM band in South Carolina on Saturday mornings. If you happen to be in South Carolina and listening to this, it's actually, the show's called KTA and the radio station is WOIC, and it's just a 1-hour show between Brad Smits, Scott Bartle, myself, and Danny, who's the host, and we're actually starting to talk to mainstream about the actual matrix that they're living in. And it's been a very, very interesting process trying to simplify everything to the point where people can get their heads around what they're actually seeing when they're looking around each other. And this is the sort of, when things start to spread out with velocity, that's the sort of conversations that we'll all be having with the people around us. And we're collecting together an archive of the shows, and we'll put them up on the IEV Exchange, because the kind of discussions we're having are very, very different to this show. It's very straightforward but very broad brushstroke stuff, and we've come up with a few interesting ways of presenting things that I think will be useful to you for when you're actually talking to people who've never heard of this stuff.
Now, Chris,
so
where will you be advertising? Where will you be advertising the shows? Are you going to start up a Facebook page?
I'm going to start up a Facebook page, probably specifically for the show, and I may end up reviving my old pseudo Facebook page that I started years ago and never used, and ended up changing the name because it just irritated me. But I think I'm over that now, and it's time to actually make things easy to find. So if you look for the One People's Oneness Radio page, information about the shows will be there, and word will get around. So that's where you'll find the conversations.
Great.
That's it.
Okay.
Very good.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
If you're not that Facebook savvy, find somebody who is. Because otherwise,
Barbara.
It won't be Barbara either.
No.
Barbara's
Barbara's
going on the road.
Oh, really?
She's stepping back from
everything.
All of her background duties with 5D, and we miss her terribly. There is a saying that everybody's replaceable, but Barbara isn't. And
well, that's there's very much a case of spreading yourself thinly, and sometimes you do need to step back from these things, which is essentially what I'm doing here. Just to rationalise and be able to keep moving forward in a useful way. So if Barbara's hitting the road, many thanks, Barbara. You've done a fantastic job.
She has.
We owe you big time.
Now, the other little announcement is this is the first anniversary this week of the Collective Imagination Show launching on its own network, on the 5D Media Network. We've been doing this for a year, guys.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Because people keep asking me, how long were you on for this? And it keeps coming back to, well, it must be about 6 months.
Yeah, right.
I get that. But no, it's a whole
Well, it was
year.
actually
wow.
longer than that, because we started on the Oculus Radio Network. And we did a couple of months of that, and then this time last year, we moved over and established our own network. And it's beautiful to see, actually, how everything has acted as a launch pad for something else. You know, we started on Oculus, which acted as a launch pad for the 5D Media Network and the Collective Imagination Show, which acted as a launch pad for Michael and Peter to start their own network and their own shows. And now it's doing the same here.
Yep.
And who knows what else can come from it and how else it can expand and grow.
Yeah. Well, I'm just sort of, I want to put Brian and Bob on notice here, because one of the things that's really struck us doing this little radio show is that what's really needed when this thing goes off, when this little love explosion goes off, and all the information's pouring out towards the mainstream media, we need some voices who really can speak their truth and put the information required out there, and that's Brian and Bob. So at some point, the Brian Kelly show and the Bob Wright show will go on the road too.
Well, you know what I really appreciate about this is that what your point to the size of the audience that we attract once, you know, things are already moving at such a rapid pace, but there's still a lot of people out there that aren't that are still asleep, if you want to call it that are going to be waking up in mass, and those people are going to be looking for outlets to find information to really catch them up on everything that they're trying to figure out, just on a much faster pace than some of us that have been following this information for all that time. So I applaud you, Chris, and I wish you nothing but the best of luck. And you know, everybody's saying, "Is Chris saying goodbye?" No, he's not. He's just starting up other conversations.
Yep, bigger conversations in a different location.
And they're much
bigger.
And I'll support him 100%, so long as he agrees to have me on as a guest on one of his shows, and then we're all good. So
could I keep you off? Could I keep you off, Brian?
Okay, Chris, people who aren't on Facebook want to know where they might be able to go to find the information. Have you got any other avenues?
Look, yes, Hope Girls on the Repurposing Crew, and if you go to Hope Girls' Facebook page...
No, people who aren't on Facebook.
Oh, people who aren't on Facebook. Probably, well, if the girls on IUV Exchange don't mind, we could put some initial information on there so that people can at least find the show, just as a place to hook up from. That's probably because all I'll need to do is find the show channel at this stage. I don't have the resources.
Once again, the One People's Oneness.
Give me a link when it comes out, and I'll blog it for you too, my man.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine.
Cool.
Any assistance there will be great. And look, I was serious, Brian, because I heard a couple of the shows you did on FM Breakfast Radio. You know, that was months ago now. But you sounded so at home on those shows. It's exactly the kind of voice. And you actually, would do even a better job now. And we only have to listen to that one phone call with Bob and the work he does on the transitioning show. And, you guys will end up in mainstream media. Absolutely. When this goes. I'm absolutely assuming Lisa will probably hit there before you, but that you'll just have to put up with that.
We're just going to keep riding Lisa's coattails, just as like we have for the last 7 years.
Yep. Well,
I actually wanted to say thank you to David O'Brien, because you did mention Oculus Radio.
Yep.
And David, if you're listening, we miss you. Come back.
And we have a lot to thank you for. You put Bob and I together.
Yes.
Got me on radio in the first place. He
was my first introduction to radio, so.
Yep. And he gave us the space to do the Collective Imagination show. So a huge thank you to David.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Elisa, when you make Morocco and turn 5D Media Network into a mainstream media network, that'll be a good day.
That's the plan.
It's coming.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's absolutely needed. I mean, what are they going to do? Those guys have got nowhere to go. They haven't got a clue.
Guys, we're down to 90 seconds.
90 seconds.
Now, do you actually have a link yet for your radio shows? Have you got it set up?
No, I don't. But I will put that through as many resources as possible in the next day or two. The first show won't be till next Monday, till the repurposing show. Mm-hmm. And it'll be a resumption of the conversation we started on Monday, which was a very, very simplified version of CVAC, so we can get the basic concept into people's heads and expand out the details. It's going to be very oriented towards, call it CVAC style self-governance. We're not, I'm not absolutely committing the one people to doing anything but having this discussion. We can call it whatever we decide to call it. Mm-hmm. CVAC's a great place to start. It's a great concept.
Okay, so in regards to the 5D Media Network, that leaves us with a couple of open time slots. So I am talking to Bethany, who many of you will be familiar with, in regards to a new show. And I'm also looking at using that time slot to get back into doing interviews. So
yay.
Depends on how much I know. I've taken 6 months off interviews, but we'll see how we go. Yeah. So thank you, everybody listening, everybody who will listen, everybody in the chat room. You're awesome. I will get the copy of the award posted so you can all see it. And bye for now.
Bye,
see you tomorrow for the Collective
Imagination
first anniversary.
Chris, we love you, man. Good luck.
Love you too, guys.
Talk to you soon.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.